In this episode of Winning the Inner Game, you get to hear from Michael Kostka, a former NHLer, on his journey to get there. And so there's lots of great lessons you can take out of this. Take, for example, he faced all kinds of adversity, from getting cut from his AAA team, not getting drafted to the OHL, not getting drafted to the NHL, and then not finally making it to the NHL until he was age 27. So all kinds of resiliency that he showed, and we talk about some great lessons such as owning your story and where you are, and the confidence struggles and adversities that even pro athletes have to overcome and deal with. So lots of great lessons in here, great stories and examples. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. As always, definitely reach out if you have any questions or things you'd like us to talk about, or if you're interested in any of our programs. Enjoy. I'll just go straight into it. All right, thanks for joining, Mike. Why don't you just start off by telling us a bit about your story? Obviously, you had a pretty long and pretty interesting career. I think there's lots of great lessons in it. Why don't you jump right in?
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, definitely. It is a bit of a long story. I'll try to keep it as compact as possible. Yeah, I guess growing up, minor hockey, I grew up in Ajax, so I played my minor hockey there. I played 1 year in Whitby up until provincial junior that I played for the Ajax Axemen, which I don't think exists anymore.
Yeah.
But then 1 year with Aurora. And through those years as well, that was around like the Bantam draft and whatnot. So I wasn't drafted to the OHL. Ended up jumping on an opportunity to play at University of Massachusetts in Amherst.
Yeah.
So I went there for 4 years, and yeah, at that time, I think it was my freshman year, would have been my draft year. Wasn't drafted to the NHL, so I ended up staying for the 4 years and was fortunate to sign with the Buffalo Sabres out of my senior year, and that kicked off what turned out to be a 10-year pro career in the AHL for 9 teams, in the NHL for 5 teams, and then 1 team in the Swedish Elite League.
Yeah, wow, that's a pretty cool career, and obviously, so there's a lot of adversity in there and successes in there too. I noticed a lot of like Defenseman of the Year, Academic All-Canadian. But I'd like to start back, maybe give a bit more detail, like going undrafted. How was that? Like, did you want, like, were you kind of feeling like you should have got or expected to get drafted? And because that's often a big adversity early on, and a lot of players obviously get devastated when they don't get drafted to the OHL and those kind of things. How was that for you?
Yeah, I would say even a little bit earlier than that, when I was 13. Not sure what year that would have been. One of the Pee Wee, maybe it was minor Bantam or major Pee Wee. I had played AAA up until that point, and then everyone hit puberty, and I didn't. So
Yeah.
I was scratching and clawing to try to keep up with what was now a man's game, and I ended up getting cut from the AAA team for the first time, and
Oh wow,
that was a huge shock to me. I mean, I'd always just kind of gone about my business, and I'd always played. These were my friends I had grown up with, and that was a really pivotal moment in my early years for sure, because I learned probably the most valuable lesson that you can, like, if you want to succeed or if you want to move forward, you can't give them a reason to say no.
Yeah.
And I remember being really frustrated about feeling like I should have made the team, that there was politics involved, as everyone knows there always is.
Yeah. Way too much politics in minor hockey.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the good lesson that was that it didn't matter, because like I couldn't control the politics.
Yeah.
I couldn't control anything other than the fact that I remember my dad asking me, were you undeniably good enough to be on the team? And the answer was no. Like if push came to shove and it came down to someone else's opinion, they could make an argument for someone else, and that's what happened. So that really sparked a mindset, or the beginning of building a mindset around, okay, like really I have to take responsibility for my own success and shortcomings. And that really, I think, was a common theme throughout my entire career.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't going to make excuses for why I didn't make a team or why I didn't get chosen. I was really just going to put all my energy into what I could control, and that really was just the effort physically and mentally I put into the game.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And then so you kind of made back into AAA, and then you played your minor midget year, and then midget you played with Ajax as well, and then did you get AP'd for a year, like kind of went up and down for one of those years?
Yeah, so I ended up playing. I went over and played in Whitby for that 1 year, and then I came back to Ajax the following. Ended up
Mhm.
playing provincial junior. So yeah, I went through the draft. I didn't get drafted. I didn't expect to get drafted
Yeah,
necessarily. I was a late bloomer. I was kind of
yeah,
I was going to come my own a bit later. Good enough to play AAA, but
yeah.
not probably pretty average.
Hmm.
And so I played provincial, or I played midget, and I was kind of up and down
Yeah.
when I was 15 or 16 from the midget team to the junior team, and then when I was 17, I made the junior team in Ajax, and then I ended up playing the following year. At the end of that season, I committed to UMass. I got really lucky, actually.
Yeah.
Elliott was our goalie for the Axemen, and we were terrible. He was
Yeah.
getting shelled for about 50 shots a night. The
Oh, no.
scouts were all over him and came to watch him play.
Yeah.
And I just happened to have a really good game.
Yeah.
And then I went down on a recruiting trip and committed soon thereafter. So
Oh,
that's
awesome.
kind of how I got my
Yeah.
opportunity to get in with the NCAA.
And then you went and played in Aurora the year after.
Yeah, I went and played in Aurora the year after. It was a great experience. We won a national championship, and I
Mhm.
got another year to develop.
Yeah.
And following that year, I ended up going to school at UMass.
Nice. And tell me a bit about, did you ever contemplate going to the OHL? I guess since you're a late bloomer, it just seemed a bit more obvious to go NCAA and take the longer route.
Yeah, to be honest, like for the first few years, it wasn't even on my radar. I wasn't good enough at
Mhm.
that point to jump in, especially as an undrafted player. Like you really have to make some pretty big
Yeah.
leaps
Yeah.
to get there. After that year in Aurora, I did have an opportunity to go play in Barrie,
Hmm.
um, and I, I entertained the idea of it, but really didn't. It really didn't make sense. I was really excited about going to school, and I would have been going into the OHL as an 18-year-old,
Yeah.
limited window of opportunity, and
Yeah.
it just seemed like the right decision. It wasn't really much of a decision, to be
Yeah.
honest.
No, for sure. It's kind of like the path was there for you. And then
Yeah.
what was it? Tell me a bit about what it was like being at an NCAA. And because I think a lot of, especially in Canada, we hear a lot about the OHL, but we don't always get to hear a lot about what it's like playing NCAA and that experience. Because obviously that was a good development experience for you, and you did quite well there, being academic all Canadian, and you studied psychology and stuff. So I don't know. You want to tell me a bit
Yeah,
more about the experience and those years?
for sure. Yeah, I had a blast. I ended up staying for all 4 years.
Hmm.
First year would have been my draft year to the NHL, and at that point, I started to, like, I was on, I don't know, the central scouting list, kind of on the bubble of where I could have
Okay.
been drafted.
Yeah.
So that was the first time that it was really a possibility, and different types of pressures then start seeping in. Before, in a way, it was almost easier because I didn't have a lot of
Yeah.
external pressure
Hmm.
or expectation, and there was no social media back then, so
Yeah.
you're not hearing it from every angle.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I went in that first year. I had hoped to get drafted, but
Yeah.
there I didn't end up going, and it wasn't that big of a deal. I knew I was going to be there or I had at least the opportunity to be there for 4 years to develop, which
Yeah.
at the end of that time, if I was good enough, I would hopefully get an opportunity.
Yeah.
So it was just such a great experience now that I look back, as far as just growing up
Hmm.
and maturing as a person, of course, as a player, like
Yeah.
such a, you know, you have 4 years during those like 18 to 22. Those are some pretty important years to really, you know, grow into your body, to grow into your game, to learn a lot. And then on top of it, I ended up studying psychology, which I really enjoyed. And it's college sports in the US, they do it right. Like it's a really fun environment. I think they pump out some of the top players. I think that Cale Makar, who's playing in Colorado now, he just came out of UMass as well.
Nice.
And so I really did. I had such a great experience for my 4 years. And I even, you know, once I turned pro, I would see the difference in guys who had played major junior versus college.
Yeah.
Funny enough, almost every junior guy said they wish they went to college.
Oh, really? There you go.
Now, mind you, that was in the minors, so guys are maybe a little bit upset. Not in the NHL yet. Yeah. But just as far as the experience, I think it's just a really cool time in your life to be able to grow up, to have some fun, to learn in school and learn about yourself, and then develop your game.
No, for sure. No, that's good insight there. And then obviously, like the big jump then going to sign in the pros and playing in the AHL for a while. And then, you know, obviously one of the big interesting stories is it wasn't until you're 27 until you made your first NHL debut. You want to tell us a bit about like that kind of struggle and obviously the joy of that and getting there, and then also like, you know, that time. I know there's a breaking point there where you're like, oh, should I just go to Europe and that kind of idea. I think that's a really great story of, you know, resiliency, taking that time and continue to work on your game after school and those years in the AHL.
Yeah, it was. I signed with Buffalo's organization out of UMass, so I ended up playing in Portland, Maine, in their American League team for 2 years. And then I could rifle through all of it right now. I'll probably do go as we go through the story. I think the most important part that I can think of throughout the entire process, like you talk about resilience, and it was really important for me to understand what my goal was, you know, what my purpose was. And for me, it was making the NHL. I knew that's what I wanted to accomplish. I had a lot of good years in the American League before I even got one game in the NHL, and there were some really good offers to go over to Europe, which I'm sure would have been great as well. But for me, I just really wanted to play in the NHL. That was my goal. So I stuck to the process of being in the minors. And really committed to, I needed to find ways to get better faster than other players. Because I was older. I was 22, 23, playing my first years of pro. I was undrafted, so I was fighting from behind a bit. If I was going to make it over any of their young prospects, I had to be, similarly, from that same lesson that I learned when I was 13, I had to be undeniably better than them because they were going to get every opportunity. So that was kind of the driver for me. It really gave me a lot of fire. People telling me I couldn't do it was always one of my favorite motivators. You know, I think it's a natural one that can really go either way. You know, it can shut you down for sure, but I always got pissed off and I used that energy to work harder. And throughout the next, I guess it was like 4.5 years, I played the 2 years in Portland, Maine. And then I didn't get re-signed. So then I signed just an American League deal with Rochester, which was Florida's farm team. I had a really good year. And then I signed a 2-way contract with Florida. They were down in San Antonio the next year. I went into that training camp and I was like really on top of my game. I was like third in defense scoring in the American League the year before. I was I was so pumped to go in. And I went and I had a great camp in Florida, and I almost made the team. And they sent me down. They're like, hey, you're going to be up in no time. Just be patient. We have Eric Goodbranson was their first overall pick. I think he was 9th overall or something like that to Florida. They're like, we have to give him an opportunity, but just, you know, and he was he was a great young player as well. So but that's kind of how it works, right? Like I was 25, he was 18 or 19, and he can hang, and he's 7 years younger.
Yeah.
He's going to get the opportunity. So it wasn't so much about being pissed off about not making it. It was just knowing now, I was like, wow, I'm right on the cusp.
Yeah.
I went down to the minors and got off to not the best start of the season. And then within 2 months, I got traded to Tampa's organization. And I was like, oh my God, all the stock I had just built up, with the GM telling me I'm going to get called up soon. Now I got tossed into a trade. It was 2 guys for 2 guys. And I'll never forget it. The GM called me. He's like, hey, Mike, we're happy to have you aboard. We really liked you in rookie camp. And in that moment, I just I froze because I didn't go to rookie camp. So I knew that the other guy on my team they traded for was the one they wanted, and I just got tossed in the deal. So I was like, oh, man. I just went from almost making the NHL to getting traded to another team that doesn't even know who I am.
Oh, no.
So, to speak to a bit of adversity, right? And
yeah.
Fortunately, that was a team that John Cooper was coaching in the minors, and I fell into a really great opportunity. We ended up, I think, breaking the pro hockey record. We won 28 games in a row to finish the season.
Nice.
And won the Calder Cup, finishing 43-3, I think, in those last 46 games. And
oh, wow.
So it was, just the ups, downs all around, the curveballs that you never expect to happen. But the common theme throughout the entire time was just I knew what my goal was. I was just, I wasn't going to be deterred by even a GM calling me and saying, hey, we're happy to have you aboard. And I knew that he had no idea who I was.
That's crazy. Yeah. So and so you kept pushing through, and one of the things that probably stands out there, like you said, you had a lot of people saying you can't do it, and because you were kind of average size, maybe lower average size, and your game relied more on skill, a right-handed defenseman, and power play and vision, and so obviously there wasn't a lot of people always believing in you, and so you had to believe in yourself and have that work on your own self-image and self-confidence, and obviously you probably had a pretty good support system. Like it sounds like your dad was very helpful, and I'm sure you had some good advice from teammates at times. But do you want to maybe speak more to that, where that self-belief kind of came from, and how you fostered that and maintain that and let go of or use this, the people, the naysayers and the you can't do it to kind of only solidify that maybe even stronger.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think, it was an interesting time. Like game has shifted so much. Like when I was in university, it was about getting big and bulky. And, I'm 6'1", I weighed 210 pounds. I was just a big ball of muscle, but I couldn't skate for longer than 10 seconds for a little bit. And then had to sort through that. But the one area that even when I was younger, I played a lot of competitive golf, and I started reading some sports psych books. Just about the mental side of the game, especially in golf, how valuable that can be. And that sparked my interest in the mental side. And then as I was playing more competitive hockey than golf, as I got a bit older, I was just really fascinated with, okay, how can I apply this to hockey? And there are kind of 2 parts of it. I think one was learning the techniques like imagery and whatnot to really kind of prime myself before games. But the other side, I remember getting a book called Mind Gym, and there were great little 3-page chapters that just, really easy to just, they focused on a lot of little pieces, and the mental toughness part about just motivating yourself or using the naysayers as motivation as opposed to things that are going to get you down. Those were pieces and techniques that I learned to just make habit because you are affected by it emotionally. When I was on that call with the GM, it's the first initial response is oh crap, this sucks. This is the worst, and then it just cascades and you just, it just starts going through worst case scenarios in your mind. And that's kind of how we're all programmed to think naturally. And so it was about just kind of rewiring that through when I would just creating a better awareness around when those thoughts start happening, and then switching them to positive thoughts, positive self-talk.
Yeah.
And that even now to this day, like in any part of my life, that's probably one of the most most important lessons I've learned, and most beneficial techniques that I use in everyday life, because our emotions take us for a ride in everything we do, and it's having the awareness when those negative ones come up, and having a good enough relationship with it where you can that it's important to, if you want to accomplish something or move forward or just live a fulfilling life, you have to find ways to counteract those negative thoughts and emotions.
No, exactly. And so no, that's a big part of it. And was there any times though, of course, so like you really worked on that habit of, changing your mindset. And I really like that you talk about being aware, and self-awareness is obviously a huge piece to the mental skills and into your own mindset, and then being able to have an accurate self-image I talk a lot about. But were there any times, obviously, like you said there's like you getting down on yourself, or you kind of almost wanted to quit, or those really tough moments I think are important to touch on as well, leading up to, especially before you made that the breakthrough into the NHL. What is there any kind of other key moments that stand out there, and overcoming those kind of self-doubts, and where you got hard on yourself or wanted to quit, or anything along those lines? Or
Yeah, for sure. Like every day.
Sounds all right.
That's but it's funny because I think people have this kind of romantic idea of, you go through the process, and the guys who make the NHL, they get drafted to the OHL, they do really well, or major junior, do really well, and then they get drafted to the NHL, and they go play 1 year in the minors, and then they get a call, and then they go up and they play 18 years of happy hockey, and then they hold a press conference, and that's a wrap. That was,
great story.
Like that's how I kind of envisioned it. It couldn't have been any further from that. Not that it was not in a bad way, but just, kind of thinking the struggles, the real deep struggles at times where, a good example I can think of is after that second year pro, I played 2 years in the American League, and I had 2 good seasons, and a couple like 30-point seasons. And just expecting they were going to re-sign me, I was building up stock in the organization with Buffalo, and trending in what I thought was the right direction. And then I got called in the summer, and they were just like, "Yep, we're not re-signing you." And it was just I can still picture where I was in my bedroom, like just like a gut punch. I was like, instant anxiety, everything. Like, what am I going to do? Like, I thought I was on a much different trajectory than clearly they did. But there was also part of just the realistic part of, they had some younger guys coming up in the system, and they weren't dissatisfied with my play. They just had, it's a bunch of puzzle pieces that they work to fit in. And I was the odd man out. So that was a really tough summer, because I had some offers to go over to play in Europe. And I didn't want to, but I didn't have any other offer. I didn't end up getting my contract until the very end of August. So I trained the entire summer without knowing where I was going to go, and said no to a team in Germany, because I was just, I actually had a really good friend by the name of Marco Rosa, who actually is still playing. He's in Italy now. He's in his late 30s. He just played for the World Championships, like for Italy. Like, he's got a crazy story as well. But I remember he came over, and I told him I was gonna, at the time we were both slugging it out in the minors, and he came over the night before I was gonna sign in Germany, and he said, he's like, "Hey, if you think you even have a 1% chance of making the NHL, and that's what you want," he's like, "don't go over now." And it just clicked, and it made sense to me in that moment. And I think I just needed that little shove, because I wanted outs. The discomfort of waking up every morning knowing I didn't have a job or know where I was going to go was,
Mm-hmm.
it was really stressful.
Yeah.
And so that's a perfect example of a time where, yeah, I would every day, like multiple times a day, I was just,
Yeah.
what am I doing? Am I going to get something? Is this it? Is this the end of the road? Like,
Yeah.
That, and then working as hard as I could mentally to reverse that. But at times it's just really difficult.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. So no, that's but and then you definitely persevered and you stuck with it, and obviously it's great to hear the success story at 27. You want to tell me a bit about that kind of experience and the maybe like the joy and the satisfaction of that lots of long haul. Like I don't know, there's not probably too many other people with that kind of a debut, a late of a debut in the NHL. So what was that like for you?
There was definitely a bit of anticipation leading up to
Yeah.
yeah. Well, after that year, I told you I played with Tampa's farm team. We ended up winning the Calder Cup, and
Yeah.
um, I ended up, and again with them, like I led the American League in defense scoring in the playoffs. Like I was like really on top of my game. I was 27 or 26 at the time.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I'm with Tampa's organization. Like we just won a championship. Like, I went into my end of the year meeting and I was like, okay. And like they wanted to re-sign me, but I said, I'm at a point in my career, like I really need an opportunity to crack the NHL team. And I really appreciated it. They were straight up and they said, right now we don't have you slotted there, at least at the beginning of next season.
Yeah.
So we mutually parted ways and I went to free agency. And coincidentally, Toronto was the first team I called.
Yeah.
And I signed with the Leafs and the Marlies on a two-way deal over that summer. So now and they were really excited about having me, and I was over the moon. I was, grew up a Leafs fan from just down the road. Like this is how you write it. And September rolls around and I'm so pumped, and what happens? Well, there's a lockout.
Yeah.
I'm like, come on, man. like, what else? Like, I'm just like looking up at the heavens. I'm like, all right, you got another one for me?
Yeah.
Here we go. So now the entire thing I've worked for my entire career doesn't even exist.
Yeah.
Not even an option at the moment.
Yeah.
But and that was really frustrating because it's not like I was 21 and if they had have decided to stay locked out for the year, that's a year lost. Like that's the clock was ticking for my opportunity. And just decided to put my head down and just get off to as good of a start and just be as prepared as possible I could be for the event that the lockout was going to end. And in January it did. They brought a select few of us to training camp because there wasn't much time. It was like a week. There were no exhibition games, nothing. And I ended up making the team opening night. I was paired with Phaneuf and played against Montreal, Hockey Night in Canada in Montreal, and we beat the Habs 3-2. I got an assist in my first game like that. Nice. I can still remember going into the bathroom before the game just to like throw some water on my face or it's probably fix my hair and and just wearing the jersey, but like seeing myself looking back wearing the jersey was just the craziest experience. Such a surreal moment. But interestingly enough, like I was not nervous at all. I'd spent so much time prepping for this moment. I was probably over prepared than compared to what most guys are when they play their first game. And it was an incredible experience. I think the first 20 games of that season, myself, Phaneuf, and Chara were like top 3 in ice time in the NHL.
Oh wow.
And so I went from playing like no games. And oddly enough, me and Phaneuf were the same age, but he had played like 9 years in the NHL already and made probably $30 million. And so it couldn't be any more polarizing in our route to get to that moment. But it was yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And then there became kind of what, like, at 5 different teams, and kind of went up and down a bit for
Oh,
for the next few years. What was that kind of a struggle like? And the other thing that I always like to kind of clue into that too is, like, even at the pro level, like, there can, like, confidence can sometimes go down. Like, even now that you're starting to get NHL games, and even some of the other guys you interacted with, like, I know we spoke previously once, and it's like a lot of guys, and then the pro, they'll start doubting themselves, and I'm sure you might have experienced some of that with your up and downs then from the NHL back and forth with the AHL. And how were those years?
yeah, for sure. Like even that year in Toronto was a half season, but I
Yeah.
went from playing 30 minutes a night to being a healthy scratch within like 25 games. So, you know,
Yeah.
like it's, I think, you know, the one feeling I remember having when I did make it, it was like, oh, like, of course, like relief, like every emotion under the moon. But then the just clicked of this thought of, okay, now the real work starts.
Yeah.
Like my goals were now reestablished. Like, yes, I wanted to get there, but I didn't want to just be there. I wanted to do well. I wanted to
Mhm.
be an elite player.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think the biggest part is like, I was always just in the process of improvement and growth,
Hmm.
you know, learning about, and naturally, of course, complacency always finds a way in, and that's a natural response. But if you can minimize that, you know, over time, really learning to minimize when you start feeling a little, there's a fine line between being confident and comfortable.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I think, you know, I define it as like confident. Yeah, you're feeling good, but you're on top. You're still doing the things that got you there,
Hmm.
and if not more,
Yeah.
is getting a little bit comfy and you're feeling good, but you stop doing the things that got you there, and before you know it, that catches up to you, and
Yeah.
you know you can fall off, and then with that goes your confidence.
Yeah.
So,
No, exactly.
yeah, at the end of that year, I ended up not re-signing with Toronto, which was the story for another day. But um, it
Yeah.
was some people there wanted me, and there was one that didn't. But then I was back on it again. You know, I went to free agency. I just cracked the NHL. I ended up signing with the Blackhawks, who had just won the Stanley Cup and were keeping all 7 defensemen. And I, oddly enough, that was my best opportunity. But going in
Yeah.
and even making
Yeah.
the team at the beginning of the year was probably one of my greatest accomplishments.
Yeah.
Um, and you know, but through that year, you know, I was going to be in and out of the lineup. I knew that was the case, and
Yeah.
tried to take advantage of the opportunities I had. I ended up getting hurt. I broke my foot. I was out for like
Mhm.
6 months or 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Um, Ended up going down on conditioning. I got put on waivers, and then Tampa picked me back up.
Yeah.
Finished the year with Tampa. Like this story doesn't end, I'm telling you. But I think the common theme is it was just a constant. You know, at the end of the year, I finished well. I think I led Tampa in points in the, like, we got swept by the Canadians, but I think I had 2 assists in the 4 games, which was,
Yeah.
you know, I had done well. And then out of the blue that summer, they didn't re-sign me, and I was like,
Yeah.
all right, here we go again.
Yeah.
Signed with the Rangers, and then didn't have a very good camp. I went down. I played most of the year in the minors.
Yeah.
I signed with Ottawa. Um, Battled to get back to the NHL at the end of that season. I was 30 at the time.
Hmm.
Um, but the constant was that there was nothing that was constant. You know,
It's
like,
constantly changing, right? Yeah.
and that was my journey. You know, not everyone
Yeah.
has such a transient experience, but
Hmm.
what it taught me was that it was like there was no, you just always had to work for what you got,
Yeah.
and you had to find ways to stay up. You know, of course, having a good support system of friends and family around you is key.
Hmm.
um, but also not being your own worst enemy is one of
Yeah.
the biggest pieces, because
Yeah.
there were so many times throughout all of those letdowns, and you
Yeah.
know, like, yeah, I finished the season in Toronto playing for the Leafs, and then I don't get to re-sign. Like
Yeah. Hmm.
that was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
but what do you do? You know, it always comes down okay. Like, and I got better and better at being able to park the rumination about what coulda, woulda, should. Like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. This
Right?
is what
It's
is.
just a ton of energy being poured into something that you cannot control anymore.
Yeah.
And so really just getting better at, like you said, that self-awareness and being real with yourself about where you're at. Like, it might suck more than you, like, it might be the worst feeling in the world, but if you can't control the outcome anymore, there's no point of pouring your energy into it, and it zaps you.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah, and that you've dealt with a lot of that. And one of my, main basic principles we talk a lot about is like both owning who you are and where you are, and really owning your story. And so that sounds like something you did a lot. It's just like the story's not going where you wanted it to go, but like, but if you don't own it, it's like this story. So you start beating up yourself and your own story, like then it's hard to write the next page. And so obviously you had to, the story took a lot of different turns, and but you obviously did a lot of like take responsibility, be self-aware of your thoughts and emotions, and kind of be able to sort through them and deal with them, as well as then just own it and focus on what you can control. And so it's a really great story, and obviously very inspiring. And I think it's great for a lot of people and hockey players to hear. And then the other side of that too is like that. I really like the line there of comfort and confidence, and you see it a lot too, where like player plays great and they're all happy, and then it's like too comfortable, so then the performance drops, and then they come back up, and then they come back down, and it's just like that yo-yo of confidence and that yo-yo of focus and effort level from game to game, based on they succeed and it drops, and then they don't do well and it comes back up. And so being able to walk that line and have an accurate self-image becomes really important there too. And obviously being a professional athlete and playing at those highest levels really pushed you to, to work on that as well. And otherwise you don't stay there, right? So it's a big things. Yeah. And then go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to touch on that part. The whole piece of responsibility, I think, really is probably the most important piece throughout that I took from my entire experience, because there was, you plan 15 teams in 10 years. There's not a lot that you can bank on.
Yeah.
I didn't know that that's how it was going to go, but that's how it did. And all you can ever do is just own the moment, like you said, own your story. Like, this is where I'm at. Of course, you go through the emotions and the struggles that come with it, but having that underlying sense that at the end of the day, you have to own your situation, where you're at. Dwelling on the things that are out of your control, or like, just it pushes you in the opposite direction of where you want to go.
Exactly. Yeah.
And really having a clearly defined purpose. Like, I had to know why I was doing this. I had to have that why answered long before I was going through any of these experiences, because that's the question you ask yourself every single day when you're in a tough workout, or if the coach is yelling at you, or anything goes awry. And similarly, in the same vein, like, we talk about a lot of the struggles and the things you go through and having to take responsibility. But on the other end of when things go well, one of the most common phrases you hear in pro hockey is don't get too high, don't get too low.
Yeah.
Like, it's just such a common theme, because things change so much, like seasons, players, everything has a heartbeat, and it just, there's waves. And if it's going like this, which it will, if you can find a way to just kind of like,
ride it
a little more, don't let the pendulum swing of emotion swing too much, because it's gonna turn. And if it's good, it will turn bad at times, and if it's bad, it will turn good. But a lot of that's just your perception of the outcome, and just being able to constantly remind yourself that the only thing you're ever in control of is like your effort and the work you're putting in, your attitude you're putting forth. And none of all the other stuff is really just noise.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, it's really hard to write that next page. And one of the other lines I say a lot related to that is like, when you don't own your story, and you're getting in your own head and you don't have your why, you're not taking responsibility, it's like there's weight on your shoulders or you're stuck in quicksand. And if that, which is, you can't write the next page, or it's going to be a really struggle to write that next page. And versus once you own it, it's like the weight's lifted, you're out of the quicksand, and then the pendulum swings back, and you can kind of keep it more centered and balanced. And so, it's a great story there. And the only other thing I wanted to kind of touch on briefly is just like, so obviously that's a lot about your experience, but obviously you got to hear a lot of other guys' struggles and their mindset and dealing with it. And so it's just because not a lot of people get to hear about the insights of the pros and their mindset. And then so obviously you had to work through it and had a lot of situations to own, but I'm sure you kind of maybe speak to, you don't have to throw any names out, but other players, and just and that like the commonality there, that a lot of players are dealing with, these kind of issues of confidence and focus and comfort level and all that, and adversity and the struggles. So
yeah, it's I think that's probably one of the common misconceptions of like elite players, of the top players, is that they exist up here all the time. They're just always right there. That's how they live. They're a different type of person.
Yeah.
And the ones that become elite and do end up performing at that level most consistently are the ones that were the most professional.
Yeah.
To sustain that over time, it takes a ton of effort, and I think and really just committing to constant growth.
Yeah.
Like Jonathan Taves is probably one of the most, if not the most impressive guys I ever played with. And just watching him every day, like he was so curious about different ways and how to improve all the time.
Yeah.
And it would be so easy for everyone to see and be like, oh, he doesn't have to work for it, or he just like brings it, he's Captain Serious. He just, he's always had this, and he was just so committed to growth.
Yeah.
And the guys that I saw that had that mindset, like Carol Dweck, like her book Mindset, I think is fantastic. It just speaks to that difference between fixed and growth mindsets. But the best players I played with that were able to do it over long periods of time, especially, that's the piece that, people, that's the most impressive part about when you see peak performers that do it over decades, that don't even seem to have wavered. And the reason they're able to do that is because they're always growing. Like everyone else is getting better too. So it's not like they can't afford to just get here and then stay there. Like this is actually continually to like rising the entire time. And the guys that understand that and really are committed to, similarly, like they'll have their own purpose. Like they want to be one of the best players all the time, whatever their personal goals are. In order to do that, you have to keep learning, growing, evolving, being honest and owning your own story. Even if you're one of the best players in the world, you have to be honest with yourself when things, you need to improve upon.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And then to wrap up your career, what was it like heading overseas and that decision and playing over there? Obviously, that's a great opportunity. And what was that like, in being a different country?
Yeah, I'd actually never been to Europe. At the end of every summer, when I'd finished one of these long seasons of just grueling years, I wouldn't really travel much. I'd just be happy to be home. So it was a lot of fun. My wife came over with me to a team in Sweden called Skellefteå. It was in the Swedish Elite League. An amazing experience. Like it's a completely different animal. They play 55 games. It's Olympic ice surface. The fans are more of those like kind of soccer fans of chanting throughout the games. The atmospheres are incredible. And it was really interesting because even now, reflecting on it, I think about how dead set I was on making it to the NHL. That I didn't even consider some really good options at times. And I don't have any regrets because I knew that's what my my purpose was of making it to the NHL.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing I can say is that the aspiring to play in any of those leagues is incredible. Like, and in some cases, maybe a little more stress-free, because you know, in at least some of the leagues, at least your job is secure for the year. You're not worried about being sent to the minors. At least being a bubble player like I was. That was, I never really got to settle in any one place.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so many great leagues over there that and a ton of opportunity to really explore the world, but play against some of the best European players.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess, in my mind, I always just held the NHL in such high regard of course, for a reason. But I would almost trick myself into thinking that it wouldn't have been as good of an experience. And now that I've had it, I know it would have been incredible either way. So, like I said, I don't have any regrets about the decisions I made throughout my career. But for any guys that maybe have opportunities to go over and seems like the right decision, jump on it, because you probably won't regret it.
Yeah, no, for sure. I know a few other guys that are over there, and they seem to really like it, and they're still there. So.
Oh yeah, you carve out a pretty darn good career for yourself over there, and playing 25 less games a season on a bigger sheet, a little less impact on the body.
Yeah, you get to travel Europe and all the cultural stuff too, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And something I would always thought about maybe doing when I was done playing university hockey, but then I wanted to go to school, and I wasn't that good of a player, so it wouldn't have been quite the same experience maybe you had, and I was okay, and I kind of moved on. But that's great. And then so now, and we'll talk a bit about being at Ottawa now, and now you're working on the mental side of the game as well, and looking into the educational side, and we'll kind of wrap up a bit with that. But I wanted to, if you had any other thoughts and tips on just like working on your mental game. So clearly your story like started even when you were like 13 and starting to develop that, owning your story, taking responsibility, reading some books, sounds like when you're in your teenage years and late teens, and using some of the imagery. And one kind of funny point I thought might apply is like, the flow of your hair, like, was that part of your mental game? I had a bit of similar flow when one of my last few years of junior. I let it grow out for a bit, but it's hard to maintain, I'll tell you that.
We're gonna have to dig up some of those photos, I think.
I have a couple. I'll send them to you.
Before you were Dr. Preston.
Maybe I'll grow it back. I'm not. It's just a long process to go from here to there, right? Any other thoughts on if your hair applied to it at all? Like you said, like, look like, it's a part of who you are, right? And but also any other like superstitions or things you did to mentally prepare and work on your mental game throughout your career, and obviously the impact it had.
I think, the hair, the identity piece is just, I think it probably goes with my personality, but as far as just ways to kind of keep a level-headed throughout, the ups and downs that you'll inevitably experience. It's such a great time now. I think that, access to individuals like yourself, like I didn't have that growing up. There was no easy access to that. There was like a few sports psychologists that were the ones that were reading or writing books, and the other ones, I'm sure they were there, but you didn't, and so there's that spectrum now of like, hey, you don't have to be an actual sports psychologist, but there's a lot of people that are helping with building mental toughness, mental skills. Mm-hmm. As you mentioned, I'm back to school now, University of Ottawa. I'm doing my master's in basically a sports psychology program, with the hopes of being able to help athletes and performers when I'm done, similar to the work that you're doing right now. And I love it because I know how much it impacted my career. I know how much I wish I had access to things when I was younger. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, everyone trains like crazy. We know that. We don't have to argue that part. So it's a lot harder to physically get the edge on people nowadays. And I think the mental side is what enables you to get the most out of your physical training.
Yeah.
And if you're lacking in that area, it could hold you back. Or on the other side of it, you can really get the most out of yourself and maybe be not as skilled of a player. Like for me, for sure, that was the case. You know, there were guys that were way more talented than I, but I built up the mental toughness over time to be able to hang out long enough to get an opportunity.
Yeah. No, exactly.
And continue to grow without getting too discouraged throughout all of the setbacks I had. And so I would just encourage kids to explore it and to know that it's not like, all right, I'll do 10 sessions and then I'm good for life, you know, like it's not, and I'm not pitching it in that way. But it just the fact that it's ongoing through everything we do. It's a constant practice to try to understand, be more self-aware, in hockey, in life in general. Like now I'm not playing, but these are all things that I've taken with me, you know, to try to perform in school, to be the best husband, to be the best person I can be.
Yeah.
And those come from the mental pieces that we pick up along the way through our experiences. And I think just maximizing your own potential, you know, is really contingent on what happens between our ears.
Yeah, no, for sure. And and so one of the things I wanted to kind of highlight there too was any kind of, you know, finishing tips you might have for some people, like whether it's about worried about what other people think and worried about failure are two big common ones. And kind of any, like, I think there's lots of great things we can already take away from the chat and your story and key points. But if there's any other kind of finishing tips you want to kind of throw in there from your experiences and for any, you know, players, young players, older players out there.
Yeah, I think, you know, maybe just reiterating the few points that we kind of touched on throughout, like the piece of resilience, you know, like that's really important, but it's similar to confidence. And you can't just be like, all right, go be confident, go be resilient. These are practices. These are, you know, like for me, I always got my confidence from knowing that I outworked other people. Because when it came to time to perform, I wasn't guilty about the fact that I didn't, you know, try as hard as I could have. I felt more prepared, and that freed me up to be confident to perform. So I think a lot of times people are like, oh, I'm struggling with my confidence. It's like, well, yeah, like so much of that comes from putting in the hard work before the performance happens.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And that's the mental and physical side of it.
Yeah.
And taking responsibility for where you actually are. Like, I get that it's tough at times to admit that you're not as good as you think you are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's probably the worst. That's the easiest thing that puts you into a fixed mindset because you don't want to admit that you're weak in any way.
Yeah.
But the paradox there is that you have to admit your weaknesses in order to grow.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think it's tricky to maintain confidence while you're growing, you know, growth hurts. It's not a comfortable state, but it's the long game. I think that's the biggest piece is, you know, like when you're a kid, you're like, oh, I need to make this team because if I make this team, then I'll go. Like, none of that matters. You know, like the stuff that you think is, and I get over time you grow and you gain more perspective on it, but it didn't matter that I didn't get drafted to the OHL. You know, it didn't matter that I didn't get drafted to the NHL. Like, it really didn't. Like, it could have helped. It could have hurt me.
Yeah.
You know, like there's no, it just, whatever is, and just being able to accept where you are. And if you really want something, to commit to doing the work. I outworked a ton of people, and I was willing to hang out longer than they were and just be relentless in my pursuit of that. And that's how I was able to, and I had to commit over a long period of time. Wait till I was 27 and play one game. Like, it's, you know, that wasn't how I envisioned it growing up, but boy, was it worth it. So I think just really just committing to the long game if it's something that you really want, and always being honest with yourself with where you're at so that you can continue to grow.
Yeah, no, for sure. And one of my favorite lines about vulnerability is, a lot of people see vulnerability as weakness, but it takes strength to be vulnerable and to be honest with yourself. It takes confidence to be vulnerable and talk about your weaknesses. And that's a self-assured person. That's a confident athlete to be like, hey, these are things I can work on. And I always talk about confidence as it's having an accurate self-image of yourself, and that means owning what you do well and owning what you could do differently and work on. And Brene Brown, I don't know if you read her stuff on
Oh
vulnerabilities.
yeah.
She's great, right? And definitely highlights that importance of it. So I think those are great tips. And then the only other thing I'll say, hopefully we'll get you maybe helping out with more of our athletes too. And we've chatted about that. So it might be
Yeah,
something
yeah.
to come. But either way, I think you're going to have a great career transitioning into this side of the game, and going to your story definitely resonates with me, and I'm sure a lot of people will resonate with, and inspire them and help them learn about this mental side of the game, which obviously just is not so obvious, but I think you've done a great job highlighting some key points today, and I'm sure lots of people will take lots away. So thank you again for joining me, and we'll wrap it up here. I don't know if you have any final words.
No, that was great. I appreciate it. I think, giving back to any of the kids that are playing right now, I think that's the fun part, is being able to connect and
Hmm.
share my story. And as I'm, educating myself through school to try to help out as much as I can. But yeah, it's a great journey. I mean, whatever sport you're playing,
Yeah.
sport in general, fantastic place to grow and learn, and you meet some of the lifelong friends you'll always have. So it's yeah, it was a pleasure to chat today.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, thanks.